Hi, and welcome to another edition of Newsmakers. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Friday, October 7th, 2022, and we are joined by our all-star panel of local journalists, Nick Welsh, the Mike Royko of Santa Barbara, Josh Molina, the Joe Rogan of Santa Barbara, and Jade Martinez-Pogue, who is risen from her sickbed. Jade, I understand you have COVID. Is that true?
Yeah, I'm on, I think, day 9 right now, but still testing positive. So,
Okay,
Damn.
living proof to all you COVID denialists out there that it's not over. I got my booster plus my flu shot. So I hope everyone's doing that as well. All right, Jade, we're going to let you go soon, but a couple more of your pieces of your local mental health series published this week, particularly regarding the kind of new confluence and collaboration between behavioral wellness and criminal justice. Can you just talk a little bit about what the story said?
yeah, so my first story was on the county's co-response teams, which pair a behavior wellness clinician with a law enforcement or someone from the sheriff's office to respond to these mental health crisis calls. It started as a pilot program in 2018, but they've been so successful that in the past round of budget hearings, the Board of Supervisors gave them funding to permanently staff 3 teams. When talking to behavior wellness, they're looking at adding a 4th team soon. So what these teams do, they're on a 10-hour shift and they help to go de-escalate people in crisis to try and keep them out of the jails. I think it's a pretty big problem of just sticking mentally ill people in the jail because there's no other place to hold them. And so these teams try and combat that and keep them out of jail, out of the justice system, criminal justice system.
Yeah, one of the things I thought your series did was it did a really good job of kind of personalizing this and showing the human side. And the Goleta man that you led with in one of the pieces, whose adult son is mentally ill, talking about how he's afraid to call a sheriff or afraid to call the cops because of what would happen. Can you discuss that case a little bit?
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. So first off, his son has a mental illness and they've called the co-response teams multiple times to come help in these crisis situations. And one of the things he said, which I think struck me the most, was that his wife, so this adult son's mom, is terrified of calling the police because you see all of these events happening across the country where the police don't understand that someone's having this mental breakdown or a crisis, and sometimes it gets violent and people get shot or injured in some other way. And so this man actually told me that the co-response teams were the single best thing that the county has done in his mind in terms of its whole behavioral wellness system, which is I thought that was pretty powerful because mental health is just this huge topic with issues around every single
Yeah, and it
corner.
used to be all in silos and yeah.
And so, yeah.
Well, I think I'm pretty sure that the supervisors eventually will call this the Nick Welsh co-response program, because Nick has been pushing this kind of thing on newsmakers for a number of years. What are your sources telling you about the scale, Nick, of how this is working out and whether it's going to continue to be expanded?
Well, there's first of all, Jade, you did a really great job there with that, and the other story as well. There was an interesting melodrama last I want to say Friday at one of these obscure committee meetings where they actually voted or opened the door to funding a 4th co-response team up in North County. So North County would have 2 and we'd have 2. And it was the melodrama is as Jade said, this is one of the most sort of celebrated successes that the county has had dealing with mental health and keeping people out of jail. Yet behind the scenes, there's this big tug of war as to whether or not it should be taken away from law enforcement. And there's a strong interest.
So the budget stuff goes to law enforcement. It's funded under the sheriff.
It's a sheriff. I mean, there are different funding sources, but it's basically run by the sheriff's department now, and they're the lead agency, and then behavioral wellness is the second. And there has been tension from the get-go whether or not that's the right fit. Some people say, law enforcement is too traumatizing. The flip side is that, this is a way to sensitize law enforcement to it, and there are certain people who are sufficiently, potentially dangerous that you can't divert a mental health caseworker safely unless they have that sort of backup.
Yeah, Jade, you wrote about the culture clash between the cops and the kind of feel good types. I got the sense that the behavioral wellness people were winning that, but what's your take on next point?
Yeah, well, I think I actually asked about that in one of my interviews, and from both the sheriff's office and the Department of Behavior Wellness, when I asked if they ever thought there could be a model without law enforcement, they gave me a hard no. Neither of the two departments thought it could work, at least in Santa Barbara County. Their reasons being because, some of these calls are pretty extreme. They need the sheriff's office person there. They did talk a little bit about toying with having a fire or
emergency services.
Yeah, emergency medical personnel come with the teams as well. But it didn't, taking law enforcement out of it in general seemed like something that they didn't want to see happen in Santa Barbara County. And it is interesting because I also asked both the sheriff's office and the Department of Behavioral Wellness if there were any unforeseen challenges with starting these teams and working collaboratively. And they both gave me pretty similar answers, just the cultural clash between law enforcement and behavioral wellness. I think the sheriff's office put it in a way where law enforcement tends to focus on the situation as a whole and other people affected, whereas behavioral wellness would focus on the person in crisis and getting them the help they need. So it seems like they're still working on some of their differences, but they've learned to agree to disagree and collaborate more than in the first, few months of the program.
All right, we're going to let you go back to your sick bed. I really appreciate you rallying for a couple minutes to do this, and you can continue your search for Paxlovid, I think, for the rest of the afternoon. But feel better, get better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
All right, thanks so much, Jade. Yeah, I mean, it's like, oh, this is over. It's not over. And I think winter's coming. I mean, I read these epidemiologists on Twitter.
That's what Joan Hartman said at the Board of Supervisors.
She did.
Winter is coming.
Yeah, and she mentioned the 400 deaths a day, which I think she got from Newsmakers, but that's okay. All right, let's pivot here, as we like to say in the political business. So Josh, we've been trying since January to get some entertainment and excitement out of this year's election. And really, it's come down to, I think, the two school board races, one in Goleta, one in Santa Barbara. Is it Trustee Area 1 that's got the three-way going on that you wrote about?
Goleta District Area 3 is one with Christy Lozano and Emily Zacharias and also Bert Haley. So that one's kind of heating up. I had a couple good interviews this week with Bert Haley, who has emerged from the shadows and is now trying to get a little bit of attention for his campaign, but not too much. And then I had my first ever one-on-one with Christy Lozano. So first time I actually ever talked to her in real life and in person. So I learned a lot about her there. And then Emily Zacharias is just working really hard. She's canvassing, she's walking, she's well organized with the Democratic Party, the UCSB, Young Democrats, and she's going to be speaking this Saturday at this inclusion for this education inclusion event that is happening downtown. And she's really putting in a lot of work to get elected.
Yeah, I appreciated that you talked to Bert Haley, because he didn't make the forum. I don't know what the communication was there with the organizers and so on, but he seems like, a very reasonable person to be on a school board. It kind of reminded me of the old Ed Herron type of person. And then just quickly, and then Nick, let me just finish my point. Is on the Monday night forum, I thought Emily starred. I really thought she did an outstanding job, and kind of, if anybody was a breakthrough candidate there, I thought it was her. I'm sorry, Nick, go ahead.
I was just wondering with Bert, his wife is a principal at La Patera, I understand. And is there a conflict of interest issue where you can't have a school board member whose, wife or spouse is, an employee of the district?
I don't think there is. I think the bigger issue there is that he owns a graphic design silkscreen t-shirt company, and one of his contracts is with Goleta Union School District. So I think if he wins, he would have to give that up. That would be a clear financial conflict of interest. Bert is an everyman. He is a Goleta guy. He's from Goleta. He's 56 years old, and he's volunteered on every youth sports organization and volunteered in the classroom. He is very much a average classic Goleta dad. And so he is banking on his connections over the years to get him elected. But
hey, he's not raising any money, right?
But the problem is, and this is one of the big naivete, moments for candidates, is they don't understand how politics work. Is you have to raise money to win, because you have to promote yourself. You have to advertise. He's not raising money, and he's just saying, well, people know me in the community. His wife, I think, she's principal of La Patera, and so he's banking on those connections. The big thing about Bert this week is I talked to him at his shop, and he's like, "Come over here, Josh. Come take a look at this." And he has this video of this guy in a hood pulling up at, I think it's like just before midnight. You see the car pull up, and then he comes out, hood. The guy looks around. He looks in all the wrong directions. He looks sideways, back. He's definitely not a professional at this. Never looks, at like where the camera is, of course. But he looks at it, grabs a sign, and then runs away. And I guess he took another sign. And so he has this video, and he's like, "Josh, you need to write a story. You need to write a story." I'm like, "Bert, I don't do stories about sign stealing because it happens all the time. Not that it's not a story. Somebody else legitimately can do a story. That's totally fine." I'm like, "Bert, we can get into this game, but he's like, "But do they steal it from your house?" And I'm like, "No, that's a good point. It's usually like the public right of way." But he was very worked up about this. But, Bert's a Republican. But as he says, "Hey, my parents were Republicans. The R has been there since I registered to vote." I don't care about issues, Jerry. I want to talk to you as a person. That's the kind of guy he is. I think he's going to do better than we think, but I think Emily's the one to beat.
I think the fact that somebody bothered stealing his yard sign is a sign that he arrived.
It must be. It totally must. Who do we have any suspects? Can we?
Well, he is a Republican, so he most likely is going to take votes away from Christy Lozano. So I'm not accusing that campaign of doing it, but I don't know that Emily Zacharias' team is worried about Bert Haley as much as the other team might be. I don't know.
Well, Josh was too cool to do the story, Nick, but Gene Yamamura at your paper did it, and with really a classic headline: "Campaign lawn sign theft reported." I think you just hold that one and save and recall. It's like Mideast shocker. You just, whenever you need an extra story for the
But,
front page.
you know, we are really working hard on fashioning the most generic headlines we possibly can and draining them of any sensational or lurid attributes.
Candidates debate issues.
Local man troubled.
And then the last thing on this reason, Josh, I really got the sense from your piece and your interview with Christy, you know, she's really kind of lowballing the Laura Graham Fox News predatory grooming stuff this time.
Well, you know, Jerry, she watches the show and she's listening to what I've been talking about and others. And she's actually told me this. She said, you know, I want to focus on education and I'm not running the superintendent race again. That was a different kind of race. This is about kids. This is about schools. This is education. And that's the place that she is at. And she's actually running a very understated campaign as not to have the same sort of animosity created like the superintendent's race. So
Yeah.
it's a strategic perspective. I had a good conversation with her. And you know, I quoted her, you know, she talks about I'm a human being. And I asked her, you know, you've been vilified for a year and a half by a whole bunch of people. And how are you dealing with that? And, you know, she did pause and think about it. And she did express herself in a way of saying, you know, I'm a human being and it does hurt and I deal with it. But, you know, she's been a real political villain for a long time. And so she's kind of struggling along with this campaign. She has $15,000 that she rolled over from the superintendent's race, and she's got about $15,700. Emily has raised, was it about almost 6,000, I guess. And so Bert hasn't raised a dime, Bert Haley. So money matters, but Christy's got name recognition. But if you're just doing this by the numbers, you know, Emily's going to come in first, Christy's going to come in second, and Bert's going to come in third, unless something happens.
Well, and I'm going to guess that we're going to see some at least online video ads for Christy in coming weeks. There's fingerprints on them. Nick, in the District 1 race in the Santa Barbara School Board, Dan LaBerge is sort of like Bert Haley, that in a sense, you know, just kind of a normal ordinary guy who's got, you know, kids or had kids in the schools.
Well, he's got 3 kids in the school, I think, and that's just the main separation that, you know, that emerges is that between him and Gabe Escobedo on the issues is that he has kids in the school and he is living and breathing the experience of the school districts through the prism of their experience, and that is without him there would be nobody like that on the board.
But you endorsed Gabe, and I know you didn't subject yourself to sitting through the entire 90 minutes of the coalition on neighborhood schools debate Monday. Josh did. I thought Gabe was much improved from the forum that we did with Gwen over at the Montecito Journal. He was pretty crisp in his answers. He was very responsive, but also thoughtful. You know, they didn't seem canned. It seemed like he had really thought about the education issue.
No, I think the rap on Gabe is that he just seemed like he was a little bit twitchy, looking for a seat. First he was running for the state assembly, and then he got chased out of there, knowing that he was going to get chased out of there beforehand, and then he's over there, and so, you know, there was a sort of a rap that, oh, well, he's just looking for a seat, and he's trying to get elected to anything. I think when you talk to him, that the issues of education are more, they speak to him in a more passionate, intimate way through his life experience. I mean, he talks about growing up in Ontario, where his father spent most of his time in jail, and that, you know, his own educational experience was pretty rough. and that, but for the intervention of a couple of teachers, sort of a heroic shoestring tackles, he would have gone down through the cracks. And his argument is you shouldn't need heroic intervention in order to get through the system.
Yeah.
And
And
he
then
very, he's thoughtful.
Yeah. And then the third candidate in that race, Josh, what do we think?
Oh, Effie Banyales.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I did watch that forum, and I wrote the story appropriately. I don't understand how you can have a candidates forum about education and not ask about equity, inclusion, and diversity, but that's just me. Effie is conservative. She definitely speaks for a very important population in the district. She's bilingual. She's advocating for Spanish-speaking parents. So she definitely is somebody who would have a different role on the board. The problem is she's not running a good campaign, and no one knows who she is, and you need to raise money, and you need to be out there, and Gabe is, and Dan is too. So you can either run to run, or you can run to win, and Gabe and Dan are trying to win.
Yeah, she did very well, I thought. And, it's clear that she's grounded. I mean, she understands, what goes on in schools, having worked in it. And I thought, the really differentiating issue there was when I asked about teen talk, the sex education thing. I mean, she really took the evangelical right-wing conservative position against that really rapidly, as did, I think, Christy, not Christy, Caroline Abate. Yeah. So, okay. Speaking of the assembly, did anybody watch Greg and Mike last night, or was that we were watching that fascinating Thursday night football game, which may have been the worst game in the history of the NFL? I don't know. Did you check that out, Nick? Did anybody?
I went down to the Museum of History to see the grand opening of the Mountain Drive exhibit they're putting on there, and I missed the debate.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm hoping it's up on YouTube.
I think it is. I think the League of Women Voters always tries to put their stuff out.
Did you see it?
No, I didn't. I was watching the worst NFL game, but
It was pretty bad.
I was writing about Fresco. So sorry.
Well, speaking of Fresco, I wanted to go into that because that might be the biggest story of the week, Josh, for a certain number of entitled privileged people. I name no names, but Fresco is reopening downtown, huh?
Well, it is a big story in terms of the restaurant world and the business world. It's a popular restaurant. It's been in the Five Points forever, and now it's moved to the El Centro building right next to the Lobero. And it's one of these places where you can have a nice, good family restaurant, quality meals. It's high level. And so the question is, at this time when so many restaurants are failing, we see this happening. They open up, they're gone 6 months later, a year later, because of the pandemic, because of Santa Barbara.
I think we can conclude from that your column is bad luck, Josh. I don't know. Because they're all restaurants you featured.
But
some are successful.
Wasn't the punchline of your story about Fresco was that out of 5 Points is they got this huge rent increase?
Yeah, that was astonishing that his rent or his lease is half of what it was at 5 Points.
The Florida company had jacked it up to $22,000, and he's like, I'm done. He was behind in rent, and he was able to find Jason Yeager, who's the commercial property manager, and he's paying $11,000 for this space. And SevTap used to be there, so that business and that owner modernized the kitchen. So he came into this state-of-the-art kitchen.
Oh wow!
And so it's really turnkey. The only problem is at Fresco, the old Fresco, he had 2 kitchens, so he refined the menu. So let's hope it makes it work. That's a difficult spot, but who knows?
All right, my go ahead, Nick.
But it's like right next to the Lobero Theater, and it would be sort of, let's go to the show at the Lobero, let's grab a bite to eat. It's a sort of synergy that might work out there.
Location. Yeah.
The other thing, sort of on a related, last night, the Book Den celebrated its 150th year in business, making it the oldest bookstore, no doubt, in the Western Hemisphere.
Also the oldest owner, I guess. Huh?
And the the moral of the story that their landlord is the Oddfellows Hall, and which owns the building, and the board members of the Oddfellows Hall have been very like, no, we're not increasing the rents. We have tenants down there. We like them. You've got like the New Age bookstore right next door. You've got the gallery, and
Said
you've
where
got,
Anacapa and,
Yeah.
and Ortega, right?
not Ortega,
San Bernardino.
San
San
Bernardino.
Bernardino, yeah.
It's actually right across the street from the
Yeah.
library, and you know they've been there, and this bookstore is thriving and surviving.
It's a great
despite-
bookstore.
It's a great bookstore. I mean,
And-
Eric
and-
Kelly has done a great job with it, and they have a landlord that supports them.
Hey, give me, I've never understood who the Odd Fellows are. Do you, can you,
Well,
is that
I
some
asked
Catholic
that.
thing or what is that?
It started in Wales, I am
See,
told.
I knew you would know.
And so what it was one of these, I assume it's a drinking society where at a certain point you collect money for widows and orphans for people who died in the coal mine, and you take care of them, and then you have a drink, and but they're
So
Just
the
sort of
Odd
like-
Fellows refers to the alcoholic beverage intake?
I don't know. I would be making it up, but
All
they
right.
are in lots of towns throughout America and the world.
All right, watch this pivot now. Speaking of Odd Fellows, Josh, so there were some poor firefighter this week had to pull a cat out of a house fire and resuscitated it, and I every time I read about something like this, which I'm sure is going to be in Bill's top 5 next week about the cat resuscitation. How do they have like a little teeny mask that they put on the cat, or what? Do you know?
I've covered a lot of stories in my years, but I've never covered a cat rescue, and I didn't cover this cat rescue, and I haven't read that story to begin with. So I'm not the expert on that one.
Well, they knocked down the house fire in no time, and the human inhabitants were out, but then they found this cat, and I guess the cat was not doing well, but they saved it. But I want to see it.
Tom Bolton did that story.
Yeah, I
believe.
want to see a diagram of how the cat is resuscitated in a fire. All right, real quick, couple of CARP endorsements, Nick, you made this week. What are they? Who got
Well,
endorsement?
we came out against Measure T. Measure
Against,
T
yeah.
is the basically it is the ballot measure in Carpinteria that is designed to deep six a new hotel proposed downtown. It's a 39-room hotel, 2-story, that's slated to go in 2 downtown parking lots. And people who do not like the hotel say that it's open space, it must be preserved, that the parking lots are open space, it must be preserved, and that if Measure T passed, it would pretty much kill the hotel. And we kind of concluded that the regular city review process has worked pretty well for Carpinteria for all these years. We thought it worked well enough when Veneco was trying to bypass it with its Paragon oil proposal 10 years ago. We think it still works now, and we didn't think you had to take power away from City Hall.
Yeah,
for
so
this
Josh,
project.
what do you think? The Independent comes out in favor of developers and capitalism, and and that's probably breaking news in the first place. Yeah, and then
Love the Independent, Jerry. Please don't try to coax me into saying something negative.
okay, all right, and then in the city council, who'd you endorse?
We ultimately we whiffed. We said we can't, we were so torn and between the candidates, we couldn't come up with one. It was Al Clark and Greg Carty, who both have served for 16 years. I think last time around we talked that I totally dedicated, city council members, and it would pain us that both of them were in it against each other, and I think we ultimately just couldn't agree, and so we didn't endorse.
All right, Josh, what do you got going on this week?
Well, I'm working on more election coverage. I'm doing, the overviews of the candidates race. So looking at Gabe Escobedo and Dan Lavarge and Effie Banyales, as well as the congressional race, and then Galita, Luz Reyes Martin, Roger Aceves. So working on stuff about that. The Scientology Scientology building being turned into a hotel down there. So I'm working on that as well, and I'm still in intense negotiations for my next podcast guest. Jerry, before we go, I hope you read my story about the author, A Lovely Girl. This woman wrote about this mother-in-law who hired these hitmen to kidnap her daughter-in-law, and they kidnapped her, and it's this harrowing story, and she was the last woman executed in California, and the other two people were executed, and she did a book signing, but it was
she was at Chaucer's. Yeah, I talked to Mike Takuchi about that. Is it that's already happened though, huh?
Yeah.
It did, but what's interesting is the murder took place on November 17th, 1958. The execution took place on August 8th, 1962. Think about that. How fast that was from trial, arrest, murder, trial, arrest, execution is just unheard of by today's standards. Probably she didn't get a fair trial. Certainly not by today's standards. There was.
You think the mother-in-law didn't do it?
Oh, she absolutely did do it. I don't think there's any question, but I don't think it was a fair trial. And there was back then they didn't have Miranda, so they didn't get an attorney appointed until after they confessed. She never did confess, but the two accomplices did.
Yeah, it sounded like a really good read. What's the title of the book? Remember?
A Lovely Girl.
A Lovely Girl.
Yeah, I might.
That crime, I don't know. When that crime was being reported on, Alaska and Hawaii became states. In Los Angeles, this trial got way more attention and bigger headlines than either one of those states. And part of the reason is because the mom was insanely jealous of her son. She may or may not have been having an incestuous sexual relationship with him, but regardless, it was way, way jealous. And when her son got married behind her back, and his wife was pregnant, mom just flipped out. The other thing that was interesting about it is it seems that she propositioned everybody in town to help her kill her son's wife, and nobody called the cops.
Decline of the criminal mind, yeah.
And then lastly, the thing about it was striking is that this is a woman who looks like kind of a high school librarian. And she was a total femme fatale. She'd been married
This is the mother-in-law. This is the
mother-in-law. And she would be married 11 times. She would sucker men into, you have to marry me so I can inherit this big amount of money and I'll split it with you. And then of course she wouldn't. And she was just, that this was happening at a time of American history where we all thought it was Leave It to Beaver. It was just not to be believed.
Yeah, there it is. Cold case murder and incest only on Newsmakers. You won't hear it anywhere else. Josh, we should mention, well, first of all, my interview with Salud, I thought was, he was, I really pressed him on this thing, which has bothered me about, the Republican Party becoming this authoritarian anti-democracy party. And salute going around bragging about how he works with Republicans and stuff. And he, you know, he did a pretty good job of differentiating who he works with and who he didn't. And the pool of people he can work with is going to get a lot smaller after November. But he did acknowledge the fascist trends in the Republican Party, which I thought was a good thing for him to do. And then, Josh, we should mention that Monday night we are going to do a forum on that Goleta District 3 race, huh? What time are we doing that?
Well, we are going to do a forum, and we're still talking about what it's going to look like and who it's going to be. But yeah, we are planning one.
Are we
Are
doing?
you going to show yourselves the questions in advance?
You know, the worst thing about that thing was Terry Jory was supposed to make the opening statement, and she was all prepared to. And for some reason, you know, with our vast technical knowledge, the first image that came up was me wearing a mask, which I was doing because I have a cold, and I didn't want to give it to Lanny and to Terry. And then this guy on Ed Hat goes off on me for like wearing a mask, and why is he wearing a mask when he's by himself? And so I had to weigh in on Ed Hat where my moniker is Mr. Spleen because I had it out and straightened him out on that. But
I
anyway.
think that is a great moniker.
All right. Well, you can see that one. I think it's up on the community Coalition of Neighborhood Schools. The Greg Mike Stoker thing is probably up on League of Women Voters, and then we still have our Santa Barbara District 1 up, and then we'll have a Goleta 3 up as well. So lots of stuff to be educated about the election. Read the Indy endorsement. When are you going to do the state ballot measure?
Next week.
Okay. All right. People need a lot of help with those.
Preview on the gambling one. We're going to come out against both of them on the ground. Support your local bookie.
How much to like $280 million or something? I mean, this is an amazing amount of money.
I mean, if you had just spent this money to help the homeless, you wouldn't need to help the homeless the way they're always talking about in the
and every time one of those ads runs, they lose another point in the polls. It's just,
yeah, the ads are terrible.
Yeah. Well, the one you really got to sort out is, I think, Prop 30, taxing rich people for electric cars.
We're going to jump into bed with Gavin Newsom on that one and come out against.
Oh no, yeah, I think Newsom's smart to do that. All right. Enough gibberish. Thank you for watching Newsmakers. Thanks to Josh Molina. Thanks to Nick Welsh, and we're best wishes for a quick recovery to Jade Martinez-Pogue, who's kind enough to come on and talk about her mental health coverage, if not her own mental health. All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.
All right.